Hello, everyone. Welcome to our ninth Digital Badge Academy webcast. As usual, we're going to have David Leeser kick things off here and introduce our very special guest today. David.
Thank you, and thank you, Catherine Rickelman. I've known Catherine now for years, working together at IBM, and Catherine is an authority on instructional design and on talent acquisition. And so we wanted to talk with her about what she sees on the horizon in the industry, where she thinks it's going, what she thinks the problems are, and then also where we think digital badges or digital credentials can start to help these processes. So thank you, Catherine, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for including me.
Why don't you, for the audience benefit, just give a little bit of background on yourself, where you've spent your career, what you're focused on these days, what you're passionate about.
Okay.
Just give us somewhat of an overview.
Sure. So what's really funny out of all of this is I got started in the area of design and development, learning design and development, back in the days where the military had the most money. And we would be doing part test trainer, teaching people how to run submarines, teaching people how to run pilot training, how to land a helicopter, those kinds of things. And then commercially, there was a shift into how can we take some of that kind of self-paced training and make it available for everybody into companies. Companies started to see how they could take what was stand and deliver kind of courses and bundle those and put those up online for self-paced. Okay, that started the whole computer-based training era, if you remember, and then that moved into web-based training. And so I have provided and been involved in a variety of different solution design, architecture, as well as learning, as well as deploying and hearing feedback, and then adjusting the approaches. My passion is in new hire. I love finding ways to help new employees, one, accept joining a company, but then also getting ready to join that company, and then jumping in and being a contributing member of that company as quickly as possible. No surprise, in IBM, it takes a little while to get into the mix. And the Start at IBM program is something that I've partnered with the talent acquisition team to design, develop, and deploy.
This is really, the timing on this thing is really interesting because for any company like IBM or even a small company, people are ghosting jobs. They're finding that there are sometimes government incentives that are more attractive than hiring or working in an organization. And so, companies used to compete with each other. Now they're competing sometimes with the government or other things that they
Right.
didn't expect to compete with. And so, how do you solve that problem? And maybe does your program help solve that problem?
Well, so purpose of this kind of discussion is around digital badging, right? So let's talk a little bit about how the portability of badging and the fact that someone comes to a company or gets hired in a company can share their badges to demonstrate a certain level of expertise. It is critical, but that means then what they've earned in one place means something in the place they're coming to. In IBM, as part of the new hire program, we looked at not only the day one and beyond, so when someone finally becomes an IBMer, but what could they begin doing before they start at IBM, and offering certain badges. There's some things you're not going to be able to make available because it's proprietary in nature. But IBM has badges it offers outside, right? I think of the AI and cloud offerings that they have. We encourage it to the new hires. If you're technical and you're getting ready to get started, we point to some of those existing badges for someone to begin working on. It helps engage them with the company before they start. They stay connected, and that's the biggest problem when you start looking at how do you bring or how do you entice new employees to come and work for your company. How do you draw them into you when they are at the university, or they might take up to a year before they're ready to join officially? How do you keep them involved with you? How do you not lose them? Because government goes out and offers some of the same things to try to entice. And badging is a method that could be used to engage and involve someone and stay connected to a particular company. And that's one way of looking at it. The other way is offering up these badges gives a candidate, it also gives employees who are inside of IBM an idea, an understanding of what IBM expects from them, or any other company that's offering badging. It gives them insight. Well, this company finds that professional development is very important, or communication is a critical aspect to being an effective employee at X company. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
That makes great sense. And it also makes me think that, being someone with a focus on recruitment, talent identification and how you can attract, talent from outside the organization, and also thinking how can we leverage badging that, that those individuals may have that reflect some really valuable information that can help us make those decisions. I would think that there's still some challenges even today in how you take that information and sort of ingest it and make use of it, either from the back end technology that you're using to sort of manage that whole talent identification and recruiting process, or just, how you go about looking at that kind of information. Can you speak to that a little bit, some of those challenges?
Yeah, okay, so previously in my tenure, I also got involved in working on what I would call the talent identification. How can you be more direct? And with COVID, everything started to happen at a distance. The
Mm.
personal touch, the idea of, well, we're interacting in a very personal way, or as personal as without meeting face to face, right? So talent identification had an element of technology be introduced as a precursor to, yes, I want to interview this person more fully. The idea of recording a statement about yourself and sharing that as a part of your application submission. IBM began to ask for that. They interview questions, pre-questions that you could then answer, and you were recorded, and then that got saved for somebody else to listen to. Well, think about the four people doing this. I'm not the best at doing recorded answers. You know what I mean? I have to write it down, think about it, and then I'm really good in engagement. I'm really good in interacting with somebody asking me a question. And I think that some of that introduction of those kinds of methods for pre-identification has introduced a little bit of awkwardness to the process. But at the same time, at the risk of giving away my age, um, you know, kids nowadays prefer to work that way. They like posting themselves on social media. They like recording. Speaking as someone who is a not a digital native, but learned to develop my digital capability, that is not where my go-to. I do not record myself and put myself up online automatically. So talent acquisition methods have to evolve in order to also recognize the audience you're trying to attract.
What's interesting about that, it seems like it adds a level of subjectivity that
Very
digital
much.
badges don't have. Digital badges are a verifiable achievement. It
Right.
doesn't matter if you're a good speaker. It doesn't matter what you did in the past on your resume. You don't have to have a golden pedigree, and you don't have to be able to interview well. But the digital badge itself is kind of a leveling device, and I think it kind of democratizes,
It
this
can,
process in a way. Do you think so as well?
as long as companies are recognizing that digital badge. So let's say I was at 7-Eleven and I worked at the cashier for a while and then went through some digital, I earned a badge in communication. I bring that with me in submitting my application to IBM. Will IBM recognize that? Will that plus my recorded answers to interviews get my foot in the door so someone will speak to me? With the onset of some of these other tools that could search for keywords inside of a recording, for example, or have certain things be pulled out. Automation and AI aspects sometimes dilute the personal interactions that you could glean by actually meeting with somebody, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
and I worry about that. I worry about how can you make yourself stand out when it comes down to key phrases. I mean, reworking your resume so when the search engine finds it, it finds the right people, right? How do you make yourself stand out? Digital badges are a way to make that happen. Although it would be nice if digital badges came with a preset of tags that
Mhm.
were recognized and connected within the industry, right? That's something we had talked about before, David. The idea of with the badge comes some tags that automatically explain why this badge was useful or why it was of value and what the person seeing it could use it for.
Yeah, that's so true. I think that that's sort of the next big thing in the world of digital badging is how do you establish that added context,
Right.
right?
Right.
In a way that makes, that brings more trustworthiness to that badge. Obviously, if it's an IBM issuing a badge, it's automatically it's going to come with, a pretty healthy degree of trustworthiness and integrity and that kind of thing. But if it's a lesser known issuing authority that's out there who stood up a badging program, maybe not as much. And I think that that's where some of the open standards initiatives that are in play right now, still very much kind of at an embryonic stage, I think will help. And I'm thinking things like, work that Open Skills Network is doing, and particularly around rich skill descriptor libraries or its credential engine and the work that they're doing. And hopefully, eventually, we get some of those open standards to address directly that challenge that you just talked to right there, because it still remains a big challenge. Yeah.
Well, I have a question for you guys
Yep.
because, not all badges are created equal. And companies can use badging as a way to entice, engage talent inside of their company. But then also there are some badges that would be perfectly great to carry with you. Portability. But some badges were not meant to be portable, if that
Right.
makes sense. What are you guys seeing in that space? Because I'm curious, where's the cutoff point? Because you could be overwhelmed with credentials, and let's face it, none of us have the attention span of a flea anymore. We got to be able to see it quick,
Right.
and it needs to make sense.
Right. And so I think where that's going, Jim, I'd love to hear your comments on it too, but I think where that's going is groupings of badges, people being able to so there's not very good filtering in the badge industry. And
Correct.
you think
That's
about it, who would say that we need fewer Google pages? No, nobody. But they would say if you didn't have a search engine, 10 is too many,
right.
right?
Right.
So how do you start to create badge groupings? And there are some industry standards that are starting to focus on that. From One Ed Tech, actually the US government's doing a little bit, I think the Chamber of Commerce, but basically being able to say, you know what? I have this credential wallet that has all of these different badges in it, and not just badges, by the way. It could be all of my achievements from other places. It could be college
Yeah.
degrees, whatever. And then I can create groupings. So when Catherine is looking at me for a job in IT, that's going to be very different than me doing a volunteer job in Africa.
Right. I love the wallet idea because I love the wallet on my phone.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
love that. Think about your own education or your skill wallet, a skills wallet that you
Right.
could bring with you that could be broken up into technical. Volunteer is your experience, like building out of experiences. I have to say, when I go back in time to look, because I remember doing certain things many years ago, but I haven't described it before. Wouldn't it be cool if a user could build their wallet over time and be able to look back on things that they did in the area of building expertise, developing leadership? I think some of the soft skill that a badge alone isn't sufficient, because you could have done that a number of years ago. What have you done for me lately? Right. In the
Right.
area of strategic thinking, or some of those kind of people skill, soft skill kind of badges are decent in that you've introduced, but they don't necessarily address that level that, say, somebody might be looking for. Whereas your
Mhm.
technical is flat out very clear in many instances. I love the wallet idea. I think that would be very cool. I would love to have a portable wallet I could carry around and then share with someone, or even use
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
discuss. That's
Yeah,
cool.
there's work underway to expand, the use of the wallet concept around digital badging, digital credentialing. So that's an area I'm sure is going to continue to mature and become more useful over time. Just to segue off what David was saying and kind of to continue, answering your question, I think the having standards that are associated with class, or I should say, let me back up here a second. Having standards associated with classifications of credentials. So what I mean by that, you mentioned, Catherine, about technical skills. Those are pretty clear, pretty well defined, right? And
Yep.
and if you think about how badging is being used today, most badges are reflecting some kind of specific skill or set of skills that relate to job task and things like that. In our world, it's IT related technical skills and that sort of thing. But there are other categories. Right now, the open badges standards, you can publish a badge and it can represent anything you want. And there really isn't a whole lot within that badge that can help a consumer of the badge, which could be someone like yourself or others who are looking to identify talent out in the marketplace and perhaps want to tap into the digital credentialing that people are amassing as they gain experience and go through training and all this stuff. There really isn't a good way to sort of segment those badges into logical categories. Like there's things like human skills, which are become so important. In my view, that is something that really would benefit by sitting in its own classification, right? So that when you see a badge, you know that, oh, this is something that's addressing human skills. You don't have to spend a ton of time trying to dissect it and
Right.
figure out, where it's coming from. There's give back and pay forward, things that are contribution oriented, experience, credentials that reflect
Demonstrate
actual
that.
experience. Yeah. And then
Right.
there's discrete level skills, right? Which gets into the granular piece of it, and which is sometimes a little bit tougher. But my acid test was always, should this if this should be badged, what's the criteria? What's the qualification criteria, whether or not to badge it or not? And I would always come back and say, is this something that represents a topic or subject matter that would come up in an interview? Would a interviewer or recruiter ask this
Ask a
individual, do you
question.
have this specific, SQL skill or Python skill or whatever it may be, right?
Right.
That's a pretty good indication, I think, in terms of granularity where you can go to. And then, of course, there's stacking and aggregation and how that can, lead to a little bit higher level, something that represents skill clusters, as an example. There
So
really isn't.
clusters are different than classification. I'm just trying to make sure I
Yeah, yeah,
that's
exactly,
similar.
exactly. So,
Okay.
a skills cluster. Well, this all relates to stacking of badges. Imagine yourself sitting in a recruiting or talent identification setting, and let's say someone maybe they have 25 badges that all represent discrete level skills, really important skills. That's really difficult to ingest and make sense of if you have to leaf
Right.
through 25 different credentials to answer all the questions you have. So you can aggregate those things together into sort of a step up, what I would consider maybe a milestone type of credential that can be
Okay.
easier to consume, and that's taking the consumer in mind, right? So, and if a consumer wants to go deeper, certainly you can drill into that and see what sits behind it. But I think that's one of the things that's really missing today is
Well,
is classification of credentials.
it begs the question also as to those levels you were talking about.
Right.
IBM has 5 levels that they tend to use. I think that's too many. I think you start looking across the industry. You're lucky to have beginner, intermediate, and then expert, if you will,
Yeah.
3 areas, and then let the experience that you build differentiate you in that area. You might be a new beginner, you might be an advanced beginner, as you move up within those areas, and keeping that part really simple. Because once you start, sometimes badges are all about getting you started, and then you apply, and build your experiences, and that's what grows your expertise into a certain area, and you can't always capture that in a badge.
Yeah.
And I also think we have a lot of knowledge-based badges. You can just check off you learned this in that instance. And I'm curious, what matters most out there in the open badge forum about the ability to apply, the ability to use that knowledge in some instance, to me is even more important than the
So how
knowledge.
do you, this is really good because how do you do that at scale? And Catherine, where do you think this is going? Because you mentioned, people come in with these skills, and let's just say it's a job that needs Excel and it needs these, and whatever these technical skills are. And I think many hiring organizations look at that and they check off the boxes and say, hey, this is a job as a project manager. They have a PMI certification and they have Excel skills and they know how to use project management tools. But that doesn't mean they're going to be good at that job. That just means they happen to have those technical skills. But do they have critical thinking skills?
Right,
A project manager needs negotiation skills. They
right,
need agile skills. So they need these business enablers. They need these distinctly human skills. These are the things that are more durable. But yet it seems like we're stuck in the top of the pyramid, just saying, just show me your technical skills. And by the way, then they fail and then they quit and everything else. So from your perspective, where are we at with that? And where do you think we should go with that?
well, I find that when interviewing, different companies handle that part in different ways. They will take you through a number of interviews. You get to speak with more than one group, and then that group assesses. We have scenarios that we've used, preset scenarios to plumb, to probe, to be used as a way to prompt a more open-ended discussion. Effective interviewing always eliminates the yes/no questions, right? You should be asking things like, can you describe a time where you were faced with a challenging situation and your management team wasn't around to help you? How did you handle it? Or can you describe a time, and
So
open-ended
structured
scenarios?
interview questions.
You can structure that, but in some companies, I'm finding they uncover that by exposing that candidate to more than one group to interview,
Mhm.
right? Because certain people will come at it with different questions. However, there isn't a lot of time
Yeah, right.
between, if you need to fill a position and you're afraid of losing that candidate,
Yeah,
making the decision and getting them on board.
yeah.
And so assessments are being used in interviewing during the interview process.
Hmm.
A certain portion of it is open-ended where you record your answers, but then in other instances, they have you go through psychological
Right,
tests.
right.
What's your predisposition
Yeah,
towards uh, growth mindedness,
yeah.
or you're willing to continue to learn? Are you a continuous learner? That's important. You're going to assess that in some way, shape, or form. Uh, and I don't even know that experiences can truly explain that. Resumes aren't what they used to be. I see resumes like they're written now going away. Now, this is really way out there, you guys, okay? But the idea of being jumping on that wallet idea, the idea of being, you've got your credentials and then you're able to explain your experiences, and then you use assessments to quickly pinpoint kind of that piece of where what's your underlying capability in the human.
Yeah, what you can do rather than what you did do in the past. That's what's more important, especially
Correct.
with everything changing so quickly.
Correct. What's the what is it that we could really leverage you for?
Yeah.
And I think of, if I'm allowed to say this, my inner genius. I think of the some of the assessment that they have, which digs underneath and gives you a more rounded view of that person
Yeah.
about what they might be open to doing, they might not have ever considered before.
And they
And
maybe
that's what
didn't have an opportunity to do it in the past because you know what? They were stuck in a dead-end job as an administrative assistant or working at a fast food joint, and yet they have leadership skills.
So the experiences are important. If you need to fill a job right away, your credentials, along with your number of years in given projects, that's critical to get them in there. But in addition to that, you want to plumb what's their potential. Where
Mhm.
else can I use them, leverage them as a way to engage them? People don't want to just go into a company and dot the I's and cross the T's and do the same thing over and over again. People are um, always, at least the new generations, what's next for me?
Yeah.
Where am I going to go? Where am I going to get stretched? What can I do, next? And they have very short attention spans. You do this for 1 year, I'm ready for something new. Whereas myself, I've been taught to sit in one particular area and grow experiences in that area and find my own new things to stretch into. But people, they want to, okay, I want to do this now. My next job assignment is this. Now my next managers don't have time to plan that out. So assessments and badging is a way in which to map out
Yeah.
what would be next
Yeah.
for the career, if I'm making sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think innovations like what MyInnerGenius brings to the table are huge and are so sorely needed. Um, and I certainly believe that that's where we're going to see things trend toward. It's going to become more and more important because, quite frankly, businesses every time you turn the corner, they're trying to do more with less anyway. And so,
Right.
from a human resource standpoint, you're right. There aren't enough people to go off and do those evaluations in a manual sense. And I
Right.
totally can relate to your comment about the traditional resume and where resumes potentially may go. I sit and I think, wow, if I were developing a resume today, I'm a little perplexed as to what would be the right approach, right?
Right.
Because it is changing. It's going to have to be very different.
I think that resumes too, when you think about this, what we're talking about is this insight into what makes a person tick, what their human capabilities are, what their hard skills are, all these other things, and what their passions are, what they would like to do and what they would be good at doing. When you think about a resume, it starts out being biased. It has the person's name, so you kind of have an idea what their gender is. You kind of have an idea of what, maybe their nationality or race. You definitely know their age from different things on the resume. It's just, and if they went to certain schools, you know a little bit about their culture, and then there's some sort of a, affinity with the person that's doing the hiring. And it just seems to me that so many of the ways that we've used to acquire talent or to measure talent need to go away. I mean, the college degree was designed to exclude people from the labor market. And that's why it was designed to provide this level of exclusivity. The resume is kind of the same thing. So I love where you're thinking about this, Catherine, because really you're trying to level the playing field. You
A
know?
little bit more. I
Yeah.
agree. Plus, get more insight about that person as they join your company, about what the possibilities are. Change the tone
Yeah.
of the conversation during the interview process, which they want us to do. I mean, hiring someone, you're not supposed to be hiring someone into IBM just for one job. You're hiring someone to be in IBM for the longer term. That's how we're all
Yeah.
trained on the interview process. And
Yeah.
getting a chance to get a peek into what their potential is would give some people some insight as to the person. And digitally, some of that's going away. So how are you going to compensate for that? So you can make that emotional connection. Uh, that emotional connection is still needed. We can't do everything based on AI-driven identification. You still got the personal touch that has to be included,
Mhm.
in my opinion. And speaking as a manager who's had to interview people, that's where I
Yeah.
have to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people like yourself and others who are out on the same kind of front lines like you've been on and gone through these experiences and are a practitioner and a lot of these challenges that these innovations, whether it be digital badging, the pre-hire assessments, talent fit assessments and things, I think people like yourself bring the most valuable insight as to really what's truly needed, what's really valuable, and how those innovations can continue to be developed and how they can evolve to really meet the needs.
Well, and I encourage all listeners, because it's easy to feel like you got to move fast, fast, fast. Pause, reflect, stand back, reflect, really dig into the value behind digital badging and what else can it be used for. Because collecting them is one thing, putting them together in a way that people can then acquire them is one thing. Using them, we got to stop going after the number and go after the quality of the badges that we select. Just
Right.
like we do in any resume where we look at our experiences, we should be just that deliberate about what badges we go for. I think as you look at where your career is going to go next.
It
Yeah.
does, and what matters to you would be very different than what matters to somebody in some other area, and so that's why we don't have the filtering there. So we touched on a number of different things. One was I'm just going to backtrack a little bit because I want to talk a little bit about present, but you talked about using badges to attract talent to a company. And I think that's a really interesting conversation that a lot of people don't have, that IBM is doing, creating things like professional skills badges, creating these different academies and these different online universities so people can get these badges before they even join the company. And by the way, then it's like they're wearing, a Letterman's jacket or something like that,
Right.
because now
Or you got a first pin before you
they
get
got your
started,
first
right?
pin and they have an idea of what is taught and what is expected in the company. So that is, I think just that alone is a great recommendation for companies to say, start creating badges for your potential hires or your potential customers or whatever they are. Bring that out up front. Then bringing that into the company, then using these digital badges in a way that can really democratize the hiring process in some ways,
Right.
right? But it needs to be filtered and sorted, right? It needs to
Right.
be collected in a way that makes it fast and easy for you to do that. And that requires not only that filtering capability, which is not really quite there, but also, like Jim was talking about, these rich skills descriptors that put this data in context. So you can say,
Yes.
if somebody, and Jim, you brought up this the other day, if somebody puts SQL on their resume or in their badge, what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything to me, right? But it has to be in context of what does that mean in the job to be done for the company, right?
Right.
Um,
I've
and
done
then,
some of LinkedIn's assessments and then gotten a badge
yeah.
associated, and they're taking it a little bit further with the
Mhm.
tagging and the descriptors.
Yeah.
I'm seeing that they've taken a few steps beyond what I see in some other places in terms of trying to describe what the value is there. There are some other companies that are trying to use assessments as a way to let you test out of
Mhm.
your existing knowledge, and then your badge focused in on what gaps you fill in,
Yeah.
recognizing your expertise from before, and then whatever might be primary this year or current, and then that's where you could go in and do more in-depth learning. When
Well,
it
that's
comes to
interesting. Like adaptive testing and adaptive learning, bring that into your badge program, right?
yes,
So people are not just going and earning a credential that they may not need, or maybe you can test them out of it, like you said. And it's kind of like a certification in a way. Certification doesn't require that you take courses. You just have to
right,
make sure that you have the
just show
competency
that
and
you
the
can test.
skills.
But that only works under certain circumstances,
Yeah.
a
Mhm.
certain safety training, certain kinds of, but other
Right.
things that are compliance.
Regulation.
Right, right. I mean, a lot of the regulatory, you got the experience, you should get the credit for it
Yes.
and not have to go through it again,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, where possible.
Yeah. There's one of the sort of themes that's come out during this discussion that I think is probably one of the most important areas that really needs focus right now is thinking about the consumability side of digital badging. I think there's a lot of room for improvement there, right?
Even just a couple things that would connect might be a next step, like a baby
Mhm.
step. Um, you can't go too far in some of that because it this too will change, right?
Right.
Every 2 to 3 months, something will
Yes.
change, but some fundamental pieces might go a long way towards adding some of that context right away.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because you don't have the time, and the candidates are going to move on if you don't make a decision quickly.
right, right. And I know
So,
I jumped all over the place with the conference, but it all ties back to how you're identifying your talent, engaging with your talent, staying connected with your talent, and then helping them grow once they join the company. And it all plays a part. It's just a case of how fast or in what area you need to find that talent in. Um, and I still believe in digital badging. It's just got to be made a little easier and a little more cohesive.
yeah. So, what would be your one piece of advice to people that are listening here, or a place that you think that they should go to learn more, whether it's like, one of these online universities that IBM is hosting, or
Well,
what's your recommendation?
Skills Build, IBM's site, Skills Build I point everybody to Skills Build to
Hmm.
explore because it gives anybody a chance to see how IBM put it together
Yeah.
and see how, the topics that got identified. I mean, there's a lot of time that got invested in identifying what matters most
Yeah.
in those particular. It's a great place to start. I see it as a trusted source. Now,
Excellent.
there are also LinkedIn. I've been intrigued in following some of LinkedIn's approaches. I'll get notified in LinkedIn. Oh, you tested out or you certified here. And how about this?
Yeah.
I like some of that. It reaches out to pull you back in,
Hmm.
kind of thing,
Yeah.
which is something to think about. And then I think that companies need to really take a look at how they're bringing their new hires on board. Is there a faster way of getting them started
Hmm.
before they actually start? Consider the pre-hire
Yeah.
environment. There's a lot that could be done there.
Excellent. Excellent.
That's fantastic. I always enjoy hearing the point of view and the perspectives from practitioners like yourself, people that are out there that are literally trying to make use of these innovations and advancements. I think it's just some of the most valuable insight that can be taken away to help influence things as all of this continues to mature and move forward. So,
Well, thank
Catherine,
you for letting me chime in and explore the ocean with you.
well, and perhaps we can do it again.
Would love to. That
Yeah,
would be great.
love to have you back. So, well, thank you so much, Catherine. This has been a real pleasure. We appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to meet with us today.
Thank
Thank you
you
so
for your
much.
time.
Thank you.
Are you looking to launch a digital badging program or improve an existing one? Look no further than Digital Badge Academy. Our highly popular online masterclass will help you gain the skills and insights necessary to achieve success. Enroll now and start learning today.